Have you ever wondered why the kindest people often end up the most exhausted? Why the ones who always answer the phone, always forgive, always smile, and always say yes are the very ones who feel invisible? The truth is unsettling. Your greatest weakness may not be your anger, it may be your endless friendliness. And if you don't understand why, you're silently teaching the world to consume you without ever valuing you. Most people believe that kindness is the highest virtue. They are taught from childhood to be polite, agreeable, and helpful. They learn to apologize even when they have done nothing wrong. They learn to put other people's comfort above their own peace. At first, this seems noble. Society applauds the person who gives without asking for anything in return. Friends call them dependable. Family calls them selfless. Colleagues call them easy to work with. But there is a hidden danger that almost no one talks about. The world does not only reward kindness, it also studies your limits. Every time you ignore your own needs to satisfy someone else's expectations, you quietly send a message, not through words, but through your behavior. That message says, my time is always available. My energy has no value. My peace can be sacrificed. People may not consciously realize they are receiving this message, but human nature notices patterns far more quickly than promises. Once people become accustomed to unlimited access to you, your sacrifices stop looking like generosity. They become expectations. The first favor earns appreciation. The 100th favor becomes an obligation. That is how self-abandonment begins, not in one dramatic moment, but through thousands of small decisions to place yourself last. You answer messages while ignoring your own exhaustion. You solve problems that are not yours. You carry emotional burdens that belong to other people. You become everyone's source of comfort while quietly wondering why no one notices your own silent battles. Eventually, something changes. You wake up tired before the day even begins, not because your body lacks sleep, but because your mind has been carrying responsibilities that were never yours to carry. This is how emotional burnout is born. It does not arrive with loud warnings. It arrives disguised as kindness. The more empathetic you become without boundaries, the easier it becomes for other people's emotions to replace your own. Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. Their stress becomes your stress. Their emergencies become your lifestyle. Slowly, you forget what peace even feels like. The tragedy is that many people mistake this exhaustion for proof that they are good people. It is not. Being emotionally drained is not evidence of virtue. It is often evidence that you have forgotten to protect yourself. True kindness does not require self-destruction. Imagine a tree that gives every branch, every leaf, and every piece of its strength to those around it without ever restoring itself. Eventually, there is nothing left to give. The tree dies, and so does the shelter it once provided. The same principle governs your emotional life. If you constantly pour from an empty cup, you are not becoming stronger. You are becoming invisible to yourself. Healthy people understand something that many never learn. Respect begins with the boundaries you establish, not with the sacrifices you endlessly make. When you value your own time, others begin to notice its value. When you protect your emotional energy, people become more careful with it. When you stop chasing approval, you begin attracting genuine respect. Kindness should never mean surrendering your identity. Compassion should never require abandoning your peace. The strongest people are not those who give everything away. They are those who know exactly what must never be given away. Protect your peace first, because the version of you that survives is far more valuable than the version that is endlessly available. There is a strange contradiction hidden within human nature. People often claim they admire those who are endlessly agreeable and endlessly accommodating. Yet over time, they begin to overlook those very people. It is not because kindness has lost its value. It is because what is constantly available slowly becomes invisible. Familiarity has a way of dulling appreciation. The mind naturally pays greater attention to what carries weight, and weight is created when something has limits. If your attention, time, and emotional energy are offered without measure, people unconsciously stop treating them as something valuable. This is not cruelty. It is a pattern repeated throughout human behavior, one that quietly shapes relationships without either side fully recognizing it. Think about the people who command quiet respect in every environment. They are rarely the loudest. They are not desperate to impress everyone in the room. They do not rush to fill every silence or volunteer for every request. They speak when their words matter, and they disappear when they need to restore themselves. Because they respect their own boundaries, others instinctively begin to respect them as well. Confidence is not announced. It is demonstrated through restraint. The person who knows they can walk away carries a different kind of presence than the person who fears disappointing everyone. One is guided by purpose. The other is guided by approval. This is where many people unknowingly lose their power. They confuse being liked with being respected. They answer every message immediately because they fear seeming distant. They agree with opinions they secretly reject because conflict makes them uncomfortable. They rearrange their lives to fit someone else's convenience, hoping that constant generosity will earn lasting appreciation. But appreciation built on unlimited access rarely lasts. Instead, people adapt to your availability. What once seemed generous becomes expected. What once earned gratitude becomes routine. Without realizing it, you teach others that your time has no boundaries and your emotional energy has no price. Notice how different it feels when someone values their own schedule without arrogance. They may decline an invitation because they need rest. They may postpone a conversation because they are protecting their focus. They are not rejecting people. They are honoring themselves. Ironically, this often increases the respect they receive. Why? Because boundaries communicate something words never can. They quietly say, "My life has purpose. My energy matters. If I choose to share it with you, it is intentional, not automatic." Human beings naturally recognize this kind of self-respect, even if they never say it aloud. Many people fear that becoming less available will make them seem cold or uncaring. The opposite is often true. Healthy distance allows relationships to breathe. It prevents resentment from replacing compassion. It protects empathy from turning into emotional exhaustion. When you constantly give beyond your limits, stress quietly accumulates. Anxiety grows because you are trying to meet expectations that were never meant to define your worth. Emotional burnout follows, not because you cared too much, but because you forgot that caring for yourself is part of caring for others. The goal is not to become distant, arrogant, or emotionally closed. The goal is to become intentional. Let your kindness come from strength instead of fear. Let your generosity be a choice instead of an obligation. Let your presence be meaningful because it is given freely, not because it is demanded. People who truly value you will never measure your worth by how often you are available. They will value the quality of your presence, not the quantity of your sacrifices. The moment you stop chasing approval, you give others a reason to recognize the value that was always there. There is a burden that many compassionate people carry without ever realizing it. They believe that because they understand another person's pain, they are responsible for removing it. They become the listener, the advisor, the rescuer, and the emotional shelter for everyone around them. At first, this feels meaningful. It gives them a sense of purpose. They believe they are making the world a little lighter by carrying the weight of others. But over time, something invisible begins to happen. They stop asking themselves a simple question: who is carrying me? While they spend their days absorbing everyone else's frustrations, disappointments, fears, and emotional storms, their own inner world quietly fills with unspoken exhaustion. Empathy is one of the greatest strengths a human being can possess. It allows you to understand emotions beyond your own experience. It builds trust, deepens relationships, and reminds people they are not alone. But empathy without limits slowly transforms into emotional overload. Instead of understanding another person's pain, you begin living inside it. Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. Their stress follows you home. Their disappointment lingers in your thoughts long after the conversation has ended. You replay their problems while trying to solve your own. Day after day, your mind becomes crowded with emotions that never belonged to you in the first place. This is why so many kind people experience emotional burnout without understanding its source. They believe work has exhausted them. They blame lack of sleep or a busy schedule. Yet the deepest fatigue often comes from carrying emotional responsibilities that were never theirs to carry. Every difficult conversation leaves a mark. Every attempt to rescue someone from their own decisions consumes mental energy. Every moment spent ignoring your own emotional needs to prioritize someone else's slowly drains your resilience. Eventually, you no longer recognize the difference between compassion and self-neglect. Notice what happens when your emotional energy begins to disappear. Small problems suddenly feel overwhelming. Your patience becomes thinner. Your mind refuses to rest even when your body is still. You lie awake replaying conversations, imagining solutions to problems you cannot control, wondering whether you said enough or did enough. Anxiety quietly enters through the door you left open with endless responsibility. Stress becomes your constant companion, not because life has become impossible, but because your heart has accepted burdens that exceed its natural capacity. Many people fear that protecting themselves means becoming less caring. This misunderstanding keeps them trapped. Setting emotional boundaries does not mean refusing to help. It means recognizing that every person must ultimately carry responsibility for their own choices, emotions, and growth. You can offer guidance without surrendering your peace. You can listen without absorbing another person's suffering as your own. You can love deeply without making someone else's emotional state the measure of your happiness. The strongest form of compassion is not endless sacrifice. It is sustainable compassion. It is knowing when to step forward and when to step back. It is recognizing that constantly rescuing others may prevent them from developing the strength they need to face life themselves. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give another person is your support without taking ownership of their struggle. Protecting your emotional energy is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of wisdom. When your mind is clear, your empathy becomes genuine instead of exhausted. When your heart is rested, your kindness carries sincerity instead of resentment. And when your inner peace is protected, you become capable of helping others without losing yourself in the process. Never confuse carrying everyone's burdens with living a meaningful life. Your greatest strength is preserving the peace that allows you to keep showing up with clarity and compassion. There is one word that many people fear more than rejection, failure, or even loneliness. That word is no. Not because it is difficult to pronounce, but because of what they believe it might cost them. They fear that saying no will disappoint someone. They fear appearing selfish, rude, or unkind. So instead, they say yes when every part of them wants to refuse. They agree to responsibilities they cannot carry. They give away time they desperately need. They silence their own needs to protect someone else's comfort. And with every reluctant yes, they slowly teach themselves that their own well-being matters less than keeping everyone else happy. Guilt is often the invisible chain that keeps people trapped in this pattern. It whispers that if you truly care, you should always be available. It convinces you that protecting your own energy is a form of selfishness. But pause for a moment and ask yourself a difficult question. If every decision you make is driven by guilt, are you truly being generous, or are you simply afraid of disappointing people? There is an important difference. Kindness that grows from freedom is sincere. Kindness that grows from fear eventually becomes resentment. One strengthens relationships. The other quietly destroys them from within. Consider how often people apologize for having perfectly reasonable boundaries. They apologize for needing rest after exhausting weeks. They apologize for declining invitations because they need time alone. They apologize for protecting their mental health as though peace were something to be ashamed of. Yet the people who genuinely respect you rarely demand endless sacrifice. Those who become angry the moment you establish a boundary often benefited the most from the absence of one. Sometimes the simple act of saying no reveals more about another person's intentions than years of conversation ever could. Every healthy relationship survives honest boundaries. Unhealthy relationships depend on their absence. This is why learning to refuse unnecessary demands is one of the most important forms of emotional maturity. You are not rejecting a person. You are rejecting the idea that your worth depends on constant availability. There will always be more requests than you can fulfill, more expectations than you can satisfy, and more opportunities to exhaust yourself in pursuit of approval. If you attempt to meet them all, you will eventually lose the one person whose trust matters most, your own. There is also a hidden benefit to saying no that many people overlook. It forces others to take responsibility for themselves. When you solve every problem, people stop developing their own strength. When you rescue everyone from every difficulty, they begin expecting rescue instead of growth. Real support does not mean removing every obstacle from another person's path. Sometimes it means believing they are capable enough to face those obstacles themselves. By refusing to carry every burden, you give others the opportunity to discover abilities they never knew they possessed. Notice how your life changes when your decisions are guided by purpose instead of guilt. Your schedule becomes calmer. Your thoughts become clearer. Anxiety begins to lose its grip because you are no longer trying to satisfy impossible expectations. Stress decreases because your energy is no longer scattered across commitments that never belonged to you. You become more present in the moments that truly matter because you are no longer exhausted by obligations you accepted only to avoid discomfort. Saying no is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of self-respect. It reminds both you and the people around you that your time, your attention, and your emotional energy are valuable resources, not endless supplies waiting to be consumed. The strongest people are not those who never refuse. They are those who understand that every meaningful yes is protected by the courage to say no when necessary. The moment you stop feeling guilty for protecting your peace is the moment your life begins to belong to you again. There is a reason silence has always unsettled people. Words reveal what you choose to say, but silence reveals what you choose not to chase. Most people feel an overwhelming urge to explain themselves. They defend every decision, justify every absence, and answer every criticism as though their peace depends on winning someone else's approval. They believe that if they can simply say enough, they will finally be understood. Yet the more they explain, the more they surrender control over their own emotional state. Their confidence becomes dependent on how others respond rather than on what they know to be true within themselves. Emotional control begins the moment you stop reacting to everything that demands your attention. Not every opinion deserves an answer. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding needs immediate correction. Some people are not searching for truth. They are searching for a reaction. The moment they discover they can disturb your peace with a few careless words, they gain influence over your emotions. They learn exactly which buttons to press because you have shown them where those buttons are. Calmness removes that power. A composed mind cannot easily be manipulated because it chooses its responses instead of surrendering them. Notice the difference between confidence and the need for validation. A confident person does not rush to convince everyone they are right. They understand that truth does not become stronger because it is repeated 100 times. They listen more than they speak. They observe before they act. They understand that every unnecessary explanation invites unnecessary judgment. This does not mean becoming distant or emotionally cold. It means recognizing that your energy is too valuable to spend proving your worth to people who have already decided not to see it. Silence also becomes one of the greatest tests of any relationship. The moment you stop chasing every conversation, stop sending every first message, or stop fixing every misunderstanding before the other person makes an effort, something important is revealed. Those who genuinely value your presence begin moving toward you. Those who only appreciated your constant effort slowly disappear. This is not because silence pushes people away. It simply removes the imbalance that was already there. For the first time, both people are given equal responsibility to maintain the connection. The result often tells you more than years of comfortable conversation ever could. There is another kind of silence that is equally powerful. The silence within your own mind. When every criticism keeps you awake at night, every disagreement feels personal, and every rejection becomes a question about your worth, anxiety quietly takes control. But emotional discipline changes this pattern. Instead of reacting immediately, you create space between the event and your response. In that space, clarity begins to grow. You realize that another person's opinion is not always an accurate reflection of your value. You recognize that not every disappointment requires an emotional collapse. You begin choosing peace over impulsive reactions, and with each choice, your mind becomes steadier. This inner stability transforms every part of your life. Stress loses much of its influence because you are no longer fighting battles that never belonged to you. Relationships become healthier because they are built on mutual respect instead of constant reassurance. Your words carry greater weight because they are spoken with intention rather than emotional urgency. Ironically, the less you feel compelled to prove yourself, the more people begin to trust your presence. Quiet confidence has a way of speaking louder than endless explanations ever could. Silence is not weakness. It is the discipline of knowing that your value does not increase every time you defend it. Emotional control is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to protect your peace even when emotions invite you to abandon it. Master your reactions, and you will discover that the strongest voice in any room is often the one that never needs to be raised. In the end, the greatest transformation in your life will not happen when everyone begins to like you. It will happen when you no longer depend on being liked to recognize your own worth. Too many people spend years collecting approval as though it were proof of value. They measure their success by how many people praise them, include them, or agree with them. But approval is unstable. It changes with opinions, circumstances, and convenience. If your identity is built on something so fragile, your peace will disappear the moment someone withdraws it. Lasting confidence is built on something far stronger. It comes from knowing who you are when no one is applauding, and from remaining true to your principles even when doing so disappoints others. Respect follows a very different path. It cannot be earned through constant people-pleasing or endless sacrifice. It grows when your actions consistently reflect self-respect, emotional discipline, and integrity. People may not always agree with your decisions, but they recognize the quiet strength of someone who refuses to betray themselves for temporary acceptance. That strength cannot be borrowed, and it cannot be imitated. It is built every time you choose honesty over approval, boundaries over guilt, and inner peace over unnecessary conflict. As you move forward, remember everything this journey has revealed. Kindness without boundaries becomes exhaustion. Endless availability invites entitlement. Carrying everyone's emotions leads to burnout. Guilt keeps you trapped in obligations that steal your peace. Silence and emotional control expose the true nature of every relationship. Together, these lessons point toward one truth. Protecting yourself does not make you less compassionate. It allows your compassion to remain genuine instead of becoming resentment disguised as generosity. The world does not need another person who is endlessly available while secretly falling apart inside. It needs people who are emotionally grounded, mentally clear, and courageous enough to value their own well-being. When you stop trying to be everything for everyone, you finally become the person you were meant to be for yourself. And from that place of strength, every relationship you build becomes healthier, more honest, and far more meaningful. Protect your peace, honor your boundaries, and let your life be guided by self-respect rather than the endless pursuit of approval.